On Dirith 9, no one expected things to get better. The outer settlements had long since stopped pretending they were salvageable. Power flickered, water filters clogged, and the sky turned orange with dust more days than not. The central dome still functioned, barely, but the rest of the colony was rotting from the outside in. Havencore didn't mind that. He liked the quiet. The less light, the fewer people. He lived in an old mechanics bay on the edge of Sector Ring 12, a concrete garage fused into the side of a dead cargo tower. It wasn't much, but it had heat, a locking door, and power enough to keep his tools charged. After everything that had happened in the core systems, it was more than he expected. He spent his days fixing broken crawler haulers and jury-rigging old atmospheric vents for credits nobody valued anymore. At night, he sat at his workbench under the dull hum of an overhead lamp, soldering parts no one else could, just for something to do. He didn't talk much. Didn't drink. Didn't need anyone. And then she showed up. The first time he saw her was just after midnight. He'd come back from a long repair job outside the dome's shield perimeter, sore, dust-caked, and half-frozen from the winds. As he keyed in the door code, something shifted near the edge of his vision. A figure. Curled against the garage wall. He paused. She didn't move. Not toward him, not away. She was wrapped in rags that barely counted as clothing, just strips of canvas over her chest and hips, no shoes, skin streaked with dust and grime. He squinted. Bluish skin. Maybe lavender, hard to tell in the dim light. Long, tangled white hair covered most of her face. He didn't speak. Just watched her for a few seconds, then keyed the door and stepped inside. The lock hissed shut behind him. That should have been the end of it. But the next night, she was there again. Same spot. Same posture. Not begging. Not watching. Just waiting. By the fourth night, Haven couldn't ignore it. The weather had turned mean. Wind curled down the alley like a blade, and she hadn't moved. She didn't seek shelter. Didn't knock. Just sat. He stared through the reinforced door panel for a long while, arms folded. Finally, he stepped outside, walked past her without a word, and left a sealed ration pack beside her feet. She didn't reach for it. In the morning, it was still there. That night, he cracked the door open and watched. She was shaking now. Not from fear, he knew what that looked like, but from cold. Her arms were folded tight to her chest, eyes hidden. He didn't like strangers. Didn't like risks. But watching her die on his doorstep was worse. He fetched a thermal blanket, stepped back out, and gently draped it over her. She flinched but didn't resist. "You speak?" he asked. No answer. "Can you walk?" She shifted, eyes barely opening. They were gold. Bright. Faintly glowing. Even in the dark. "Yes," she whispered. He exhaled slowly. "You can't stay out here again." She didn't plead. Didn't thank him. Just nodded once. He turned and walked inside. She followed without a word, holding the blanket close, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. Inside, he turned on the heater and pointed to a spot near the wall. "Sit." She did. From across the room, he studied her. She was older than he first thought, maybe mid-20s, but thin. Shoulders drawn tight. Her posture was rigid, like someone used to being watched. Up close, he saw faint lines on her skin near the collar. Not tattoos, glyphs. Ceremonial, maybe. Her clothes were once something more. Torn now, but crafted. Not scavenged. She didn't speak. Didn't look at him. Just sat still near the heater, legs folded, hands tucked under the blanket. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer. He didn't push. Just turned back to his tools. But that night, he left a spare blanket near her spot and locked the door from the inside. She didn't sleep. Neither did he. But neither of them left. Outside, the wind howled. Something metallic slammed loose in the alley over and over. Inside, he worked with trembling focus, but his thoughts circled her presence again and again. She was curled tight near the heater, unmoving, but breathing. He stood, crossed the room, heated 2 ration packs. She didn't move until the scent filled the space. Then her eyes flicked up. He placed one near her without speaking. She took it slowly. Ate carefully. No rush. You're not local, he said. No. You from another ring? She shook her head. So why Dirith, 9? I didn't choose. That said more than anything else. He nodded. What's your name? He asked again. She hesitated, then said softly, Sarah. I'm Haven. I fix things. She nodded. He looked at her for a long time. There was something deliberate in how she held the blanket, modest, precise. Not shame. Just habit. What were you before this? Her jaw clenched. Her eyes dropped. I was stationed on a temple envoy. Doesn't matter now. Clergy. Something like that. Not anymore. No. She shook her head. Now I sleep on concrete. And for the first time in a long time, Haven didn't know what to say. So he said nothing. Just sat with her in the silence. Morning broke with a dull, orange haze bleeding in through the cracked ceiling vent. Haven hadn't slept. He rarely did. Not well. He'd stayed at his workbench most of the night, cleaning spare parts that didn't need it, glancing occasionally at the figure wrapped in a thermal blanket across the room. Sarah hadn't stirred. Not until the strip of sunlight touched her shoulder and climbed slowly toward her cheek. She shifted, sat upright, blinked at the unfamiliar space, then locked eyes with him. You can stay another night, Haven said without turning fully toward her. But I need to know if anyone's looking for you.
Her expression didn't change. I don't think so, she said finally. The last ones who had me, they dumped me in Sector 8. I escaped 2 nights before I found this place. Escaped from who? She looked at the floor. Didn't ask names. Didn't care. They weren't the first. He stood, poured a cup of heated water, sipped, grimaced. Filters were overdue for replacement. You didn't report it? To who? She said flatly. The colony enforcers barely register residents, let alone transients with no ID. I'm not even on the logs. No ID chip. She lifted her arm, showed the faint scar just beneath the elbow. Removed when I was sold. That made him pause. No trace, no record, no name. Whoever took her wanted her gone, permanently. What happens if someone recognizes you? He asked. They won't, she said, but not convincingly. He exhaled, set down the cup. I need to know what I'm risking. You don't owe me anything. Maybe not. But I opened the door. That means something. Sarah rose slowly, still wrapped in the blanket. Bruises stood out more clearly now on her legs, mottled purple and blue beneath the grime. She looked at him, eyes sharp despite the fatigue. Why did you let me in? She asked. He hesitated. Because no one else would. Because he couldn't keep pretending the suffering outside his door didn't exist. Because she hadn't begged or cried, just endured. And he'd seen enough people break to know what that meant. She held his gaze for a moment longer, then turned to the heater. The blanket slipped slightly off her shoulder. Haven moved to a shelf, grabbed a faded utility shirt and a drawstring pair of pants. Here. These should fit well enough. She took them silently. Held them like something precious. Looked at him again. Do you want me to change here? No. Use the back stall. There's a screen. She nodded and disappeared behind the curtain. He sat, rubbed his face, feeling the dirt in his stubble. What was he doing? This wasn't how he lived. He didn't invite people in. Didn't start conversations. He worked. He ate. He stayed invisible. And yet. She returned a few minutes later. The shirt hung loose on her, sleeves rolled. The pants barely clung to her hips, but she looked steadier. More present. Her silver hair had been brushed back behind her ears. Her eyes, though tired, were alert. You said you were with a temple envoy, he asked. Zerai emissary ship. Out of the Aldrex cluster. That turned his head. That's not fringe. That's official doctrine. She nodded. Religious, diplomatic, cultural. I wore robes. Gave speeches. Sang rites in 6 dialects. What happened? We were intercepted. Our vessel was boarded outside the neutral zone. Crew scattered. I was taken. Sold. She nodded once. Passed around a while. Eventually, I refused to do what they wanted. What did they want? She didn't answer. Just looked at the floor. He didn't press. She stepped toward the workbench, eyes drifting over the clutter. Her fingers traced the edge of a cracked circuit board. You fix machines. I try. She picked it up, turned it in her hands. This capacitor's blown. You could reroute with a 10-ohm coupler from an old thruster regulator. Would last maybe 10 cycles. Haven't blinked. You know tech. I ran shrine systems. Life support, NAV beacons. That was before. She handed him the part and shrugged slightly. I can help, she said. He didn't answer right away. Just watched her. There was strength in her. Quiet, worn, but real. Not broken. Just tired of being used. I've got a salvage job tomorrow, he said finally. Crawler rig out near Ring 14. Might need a second set of hands. She nodded. Good, he said. You can stay here. Rest. Eat. Help if you want. Or don't. She looked at him, and for the first time, her lips curved just slightly. A shadow of a smile. Small, but alive. I'd like to help. Haven nodded once. Then we'll start tomorrow. Outside, the wind had calmed. Inside, the air felt just a little warmer than before. Haven was tightening the last coupling on the crawler's rear actuator when the alert chimed. 2 short pulses, motion ping. Not a dust drift. Not a rat. This was deliberate. He slid out from under the vehicle, wiped his hands, and crossed the garage to the wall-mounted screen. The alley cam displayed a single figure moving past. Broad shoulders. Heavy coat. Torn hem. No clear insignia. Too slow to be casual. Too straight to be lost. He muted the feed and leaned back, arms crossed. He didn't like the shape of it. Inside, Sarah sat at the bench, sleeves rolled, carefully rebuilding a fried relay board. Her fingers moved with the kind of precision Haven respected, steady, deliberate, exacting. She didn't look up until he entered. I recalibrated the feedback line, she said. It's stable now. He nodded, eyes still on the screen in his mind. You ever been followed since you got here? Her expression sharpened. I haven't left the room. There was a man. Passed the alley slow. Didn't try anything. But he was looking. Sarah straightened. If they're tracking me, it won't take much. I've only stopped here. He moved to the supply locker, grabbed a small handheld scanner and a frayed canvas satchel. Tossed in water tabs, med gel, flare stick, portable power pack. You think we'll have to leave? Not yet, Haven muttered. But if someone knocks, we don't answer. We move. She nodded, no fear in her voice, just acceptance. I won't freeze again. Haven tossed her a thermal cloak. You'll need that if we run. She caught it, her eyes flicking over the material, then looked at him again. You're still helping me, even if it gets you marked. You fixed a relay no one else could. Call it even. Her look wasn't grateful. It was searching. Like she didn't quite believe anyone would speak to her that way again. But she didn't argue. She moved back to the bench, quietly packed a second tool satchel, prioritized the essentials. Haven returned to the screen. He rewound the feed. The man was definitely a scout, no hesitation in his step, no sign of wandering. This wasn't a guess. It was recon. A few minutes passed in silence. Then Sarah spoke again, voice low. Back when I was taken, one of them said I was biologically ideal. Xerian physiology adapts to several humanoid types. They wanted to breed me. Haven didn't move. I fought every transfer, she continued. Stopped eating. Made myself worthless until I became inconvenient. Then they tossed me. Why tell me this now? Because if they come back, it won't be punishment. It'll be business. And if they catch you helping me, they'll treat you like inventory. He turned to look at her. Then we don't get caught. She blinked. Then nodded. You don't flinch, she said. No. Most do. I'm not most. Another silence stretched between them. She stood, walked to the far side of the garage, where a filtered vent spilled amber light. Her silhouette was a quiet shape against the dust-hazed glow. Haven pulled a still frame from the camera, printed it, and pinned it to the wall. No name. No ID. Just a reminder. He looked back. Sarah had curled up on the workbench couch, wrapped in the cloak, her breathing slow and steady. Asleep. He double-checked the seals. Set the plasma cutter beside the door. Dimmed the lights. And sat down to watch the shadows. The breach came without warning. One moment, the garage was still. The next, the outer lock screamed under pressure and cracked open 6 centimeters before the emergency seal slammed shut again with a concussive hiss. A narrow vent of compressed gas sprayed inward as the backup system locked in place. A red strobe blinked silently across the ceiling. No alarm, no sound, just light and urgency. Haven was already crouched behind the engine block, plasma cutter in hand, body low. Sarah woke instantly, not panicked, conditioned. She slid off the workbench and moved silently toward the supply bins, keeping her form tight to the wall. Haven reached for the wall panel and tapped in the override. The outer cam came online. 2 figures. Armored. One carried a breach tool. The other a compact suppressor rifle slung low. No badges. No identifiers. Not locals, he muttered. Sarah stayed still behind the stacked bins, her breathing barely audible. They were watching. How'd they find us this fast? I've been visible too long, she said. Someone must have sold my path. On the cam, the breacher scanned the frame with practiced taps. Not testing. Measuring. Timing. Professional. They'll try the vent stack, Haven said. Rear panel, behind the coolant lines, Sarah replied. He turned to her. How do you know that? I memorized the layout while you slept. He didn't question it. Just handed her the supply satchel. Pack light. Water, meds, tools. No food. We run lean. She moved fast, efficient. No wasted motion. She knew how to flee. Haven grabbed the dust cloak, his cutter, and opened the maintenance hatch in the back wall. It was a tight tunnel, not meant for transit. Pipes overhead, grime underfoot. Just wide enough to crawl. You first. She paused at the edge, turned to him. We could split. I draw them off. We're not splitting, he said. Move. That stopped her. She held his eyes for a breath, then nodded and dropped into the crawlspace. He followed, sealing the hatch and igniting a fusion weld on the inside. It would slag shut in 10 seconds. Enough time to vanish. The tunnel was narrow, cold, coated in static dust and insulation foam. 10 minutes in, they reached a rusted grate. Haven pried it open, slid out, and helped her up. They emerged behind a collapsed shipping bay. Crates, bent trusses, and old cargo lifts littered the shadows. Sarah staggered slightly. Her breaths were short. Sit, Haven said, catching her by the arm. She resisted for a second, then relented. He knelt beside her, unwrapped an emergency heat tab, cracked it, and placed it in her hand. Keep it under your cloak. She nodded. There's a crawler garage near the East Sector power line, Haven said. Old storage site. Might still have an intact bunker chamber. Might. Friend used to keep backup gear there. He's dead now. She didn't ask how. Didn't need to. They moved again, slower now. The ruined streets were a maze of fractured metal and crushed plascrete. Every step had to be silent. Every shadow checked twice. When they reached a main corridor, Haven pulled her back. A voice echoed, faint, electronic, amplified from a loudspeaker. Return the property and you will not be harmed. Sarah froze. Her jaw tightened. I've heard that voice before. They crouched. Waited. Breath held. Eventually, the footsteps receded. They crossed. The garage wasn't much when they found it, half collapsed, roof sagging, door off its rail. But the secondary chamber still held a sealed hatch. Haven bypassed the corroded lock and shoved the panel open. Inside, rust, dust, and silence. He locked the hatch behind them and turned. Sarah had sunk onto the edge of a broken loader unit, trembling. Not from fear. From the crash of adrenaline. Her lips were pale. Skin icy. Haven dropped beside her. Let me check. I'm fine, she lied. You're not. He peeled back the edge of her cloak. Her ribs were still bruised, purple and red under the skin. Anyone else would have left me, she muttered. I'm not anyone else. Why? She asked. Why risk this? He met her eyes. Because they called you a thing. And I don't let that stand. For a moment, she just stared at him. Then slowly, for the first time, she reached for his hand. Her fingers were rough. Cold. But steady. I'm not used to being safe. You are now. He stood, powered on a low-voltage lamp, casting the room in amber glow. The space was bare, but dry. The seals held. We stay here tonight, he said. Rest. Move again tomorrow. Sarah didn't reply. But she didn't look away. And in her eyes, just for a moment, something flickered. Hope. The rain came just after midnight. At first it was a whisper, then a hiss, then a roar, acid-laced droplets drumming on the bent metal roof in a steady rhythm. Inside the bunker chamber, a salvaged heater buzzed softly, casting flickering warmth through the space. Haven sat near the hatch, cloak still damp, plasma cutter within reach. He hadn't taken off his boots. He didn't trust the silence. Not yet. Sarah sat across from him on a low bench, knees drawn up beneath the oversized thermal cloak. Her silver hair clung to her cheeks, still damp from earlier. She'd stripped down to a simple bandeau and utility pants, collarbones gleaming faintly with sweat under the heater's glow. Her expression was unreadable, watchful, tired, but not afraid. "You're pacing," she said, voice quiet. "They'll come back," Haven replied. "They always do." He moved to the wall opposite her and slid down until he was seated, back against the cold steel. "I rigged the corridor with a tripwire. Won't stop them. Might slow them." Sarah leaned forward, elbows on knees. The cloak slipped from one shoulder. "Kale," she said softly, "if they find us, don't fight for me. Just run." His jaw tightened. "Not happening. You'll die." "I don't care." She looked at him sharply. "I'm not valuable. You think that's why I'm here?" "Most men." "I'm not most men," he said firmly. Sarah looked away, eyes glinting with something sharp. Frustration. Pain. Guilt. "You say that like it matters." "It does. To me." The silence after was heavier than the storm outside. Haven stood, crossed the room, and pulled a clean undershirt from the gear bag. He sat beside her on the bench and offered it. "You're soaked." I said I'm fine. "You're shivering." She stared at the shirt in his hands. Something flickered behind her eyes. Caution. A decision. "Turn around." He did. Behind him, he heard the soft rustle of cloth, the wet slap of fabric hitting the floor, the faint shuffle as she dried herself and pulled the shirt over her head. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "You can look now." He turned. The shirt hung loose on her frame. Her silver hair was pushed behind her ears. She looked, not fragile. Just real. "Do I disgust you?" she asked, suddenly. "What?" "The bruises. The dirt. What I've been through." "No. You've never," she swallowed. "You've never tried to touch me. Not once." "I never will," he said. "Unless you ask me to." She stared. Then looked away fast. "Most men wouldn't wait for permission." "I'm not most." She whispered, "I don't know what to do with that." "Don't do anything. Just, sit." She did. Then stood. Then walked, slowly, cautiously, to his side. She sat next to him, shoulder to shoulder, her weight resting lightly against him. She didn't say anything. Didn't ask anything. "I don't sleep much," she murmured. "You're safe here." She nodded faintly. "Can I stay?" she asked after a pause. "Just like this?" "You already are." She rested her head on his shoulder. Her body was tense at first. Then, slowly, it softened. Outside, something snapped in the distance. Maybe the tripwire. Maybe not. Neither of them moved. He draped the edge of the cloak over them both. And for the first time since she'd arrived, Sarah closed her eyes without fear. And for the first time since Haven could remember, he did too. They weren't found that night. Or the next. By the third morning, the storm had passed and the tension in Haven's chest had eased, but he didn't lower his guard. He knew how long word could travel. Knew how long slaver marks could echo. Still, the bunker held. The salvaged power cell from the old comms tower ran the heater, the water condenser, even the lights. Not comfort. But enough to survive. Together, they made more. Haven repaired a rust-eaten crawler bike left in the collapsed garage. The frame was warped, the battery bank fried, but with Sarah's hands and his tools, they rebuilt it. Piece by piece. The plan was simple: leave the outer zones. Head west, into the ruins of old canyon shelters abandoned since the first colony collapse. There were old defense bunkers out there. Off-grid. Forgotten. Sarah didn't speak much during the repairs. But she moved differently now. Her back straighter. Her eyes sharper. She no longer flinched at every noise. No longer waited for instructions. At night, they shared the same cot. Sometimes she curled against him. Sometimes she didn't. But always, she stayed close. By choice. Not by fear. On the 5th day, they left. The crawler roared to life with a wheeze and a pulse of heat. It was ugly. Heavy. But it moved. And that was freedom. Haven drove. Sarah sat behind him, arms lightly around his chest, her head tucked against his back. Wind howled as they crossed the fractured flats. They passed rusted towers, broken roads, and abandoned camps that had long since turned to bone and shadow. By dusk, they reached the canyon. Haven found the panel buried beneath rock. Cleared it. Slid in a fresh cell. The bunker doors hissed open. Inside, silence. Cold, dry, unclaimed silence. "This will do," he said. Sarah turned in a circle, eyes scanning the hollow. Then she smiled. A real smile. Soft. Honest. "We could make this a home." Haven nodded. "Yeah. We could." They didn't speak of permanence, not at first. It was enough to be safe, to breathe without watching the door. Haven worked to restore power in the canyon bunker's main chamber. Sarah cleared out debris, repurposed storage crates into shelves, and layered scavenged fabric into bedding. By the end of the 2nd week, it no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like a beginning. Each day, they repaired more: solar junctions on the roof, the broken sanitation lines, a cracked water tank that Sarah sealed with paste made from dried root sap. They used what the old world had left behind and made it theirs. One night, while they shared a pot of oversalted ration stew, Haven looked across the small table and asked, "What would you do now? If you could?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. She stirred the stew, then lifted her gaze. "I already did. I stayed." "You could leave," he said. "Start over. Someone might still be looking for you, somewhere. No one is. And even if they were, I'm not who I was. I'm more now." She reached for his hand across the table. Her fingers had grown stronger. The bruises had faded. Her gold eyes were clearer now, steady. "I want to stay. Not because I owe you. Not because I'm afraid. Because I choose to." Haven's breath caught slightly. He gave a small nod. "You're not a burden. And you're not a savior," she said. "I don't want to be." She leaned closer. "Then what are we?" He didn't rush to answer. He looked at her, really looked. At the scar beneath her collarbone. At the silver hair now cleaned and tied back. At the tension she no longer carried in her shoulders. She'd come here expecting to be discarded. Now she sat in the middle of a bunker she'd helped rebuild, holding her head high. "We're just us," he said finally. "Not broken. Not hunted. Just, living." Sarah smiled again. Wider than before. And then, slowly, she leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't urgent. Wasn't desperate. It was quiet. Warm. Chosen. He kissed her back. Let her lead. Let her decide. Every piece of herself that had been taken, her name, her dignity, her body, she reclaimed in that moment, on her own terms. Not by force. Not for survival. But because she wanted to. Weeks passed. They stayed in the canyon. No one came. No voices called out from speakers. No mercenaries. No shadows. They built a life. Haven rewired the bunker's generator and installed a warning beacon on the ridge. Sarah grew fungal beds in the dry storage bays. Together, they mapped supply runs and collected anything salvageable from the nearby ruins. She painted the interior walls in earth tones and star patterns. He carved out hooks for tools and rebuilt the water pump. At night, they sat by the heater, sometimes talking, sometimes silent. Always close. They didn't call it love. They didn't have to. One morning, Sarah stepped outside alone. The wind was low. The sky over Dirith 9 had cleared for the first time in weeks. From the canyon ledge, she could see the skeletal towers of the outer colonies far on the horizon. She stood in silence. Then she whispered to the wind, "You threw me away. Said I was nothing." She pressed a hand to her chest. "But I'm still here." She turned and walked back into the bunker where Haven was adjusting a solenoid on the new water line. Sarah leaned down, kissed his cheek, and said, "I'm going to repaint this ugly place today." He didn't look up. Just smiled. "What color?" She grinned. "Something that means I'm not owned." And she did. With pigments she made herself from crushed stone, moss ash, and old industrial dye powders, she painted wild shapes, circles, constellations, moons, rising suns. The marks of a future no one had scripted for her. The marks of someone who chose to stay. Together, they made a space that wasn't about escape. It was about living. They never said the words, forever. But they never had to. In a forgotten canyon on a half-dead colony, two people built something no one expected, a life. Not polished. Not perfect. But real. Haven Core, a man who once wanted only silence and distance, found something louder and more meaningful in Sarah's quiet resilience. And Sarah, once discarded, once marked and sold, chose, again and again, to stay. Not because she had to. But because she finally could. There were no fairy tale endings. No dramatic rescues. Just the slow, patient rhythm of survival turning into stability, and stability growing into trust. She was never saved. She saved herself, by holding on long enough to be seen. And he did what no one else did. He opened the door. And that changed everything. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that survival is sometimes the strongest love story of all, then do us a favor. Like the video. Subscribe for more grounded, powerful sci-fi tales. And share it with someone who believes in second chances. Because in a universe of scars and silence, sometimes the most radical act is staying.